thank you everyone for joining us for this month's Mobrium webinar. We do one webinar every single month. It's it's always on the second Wednesday, and these trainings are SHRM PDC eligible. So we're super excited to welcome Elisa to be here with us to talk about this really important topic, focusing on skills first workforce. And before we dive in, I just wanted to mention regarding the SHRM certification credits for this event. You'll get a follow-up email after this with the recording and a really short form to fill out to get access to that activity code. We don't share it directly on the recording because someone could just watch the recording and skip to the end and copy the credit. So we're trying to be SHRM legit there by doing it how they've told us as far as how to share the activity codes. And then before I turn the time over to Elisa, I'm going to embarrass her by reading her bio. And I did want to mention, so Elisa and I met, it's been 6 years. I remember 2019 at the Utah SHRM conference. And this was before it was renamed the Work Elevated Conference. It was called Crossroads. But that was my first time speaking at the SHRM level conference. I was very nervous, and right when I walked in, Elisa was there welcoming all the different speakers and people, and she made me feel welcome and a part of this new HR community. I was pretty new to the HR scene at that point, so I have to say she lives her values as far as really being a people first leader, and I've seen that over the years following her content and interacting at different conferences. So very grateful for her leadership and excited for her to be here. And I'm going to read her bio. So Elisa Garn, SHRM-SCP, you've got the full credential there, brings over 20 years of HR experience specializing in mid-sized organizations across industries like healthcare, tech, and biotech. A recognized leader in her field, she has founded 4 businesses in various industries, including tech, consulting, and personal branding, and has been honored with the HR Achievement Award by Utah Business. Elisa's extensive leadership roles include serving as chapter president of Salt Lake SHRM, as chapter president and executive director of the Utah SHRM State Council, where she has significantly influenced HR practices. Her thought leadership is widely recognized with published work throughout the Forbes Executive HR Council, alongside numerous blogs and podcast interviews that further establish her as a credible voice in the industry. Currently, Elisa serves as SVP of Talent Management and Sustainability for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, focused on driving higher talent engagement through employee-centered work practices. Her expertise is human-centric employee experience design, combined with her strong business acumen and communication skills, ensure that clients receive the guidance, bandwidth, and resources needed to elevate their organizational impact. Very impressive. And I'm going to turn over the controls to Elisa right now so she can share her screen and take us through this really important topic. I'll be watching the chat, so if anybody has questions along the way, we'll get to those as well.
Well, my goodness, thank you. Sometimes I feel like when people read my bio, especially the lengthy ones, that's got to be like what it's like when somebody reads your eulogy at a funeral, but like at least at a funeral, you're not there and it's not awkward. So thank you for everyone for making it through that. And Matt, I also appreciate you sharing how we met. That was a really fun memory to revisit. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right. I do have the chat up as well. As Matt mentioned, we're a smaller group. So if you guys are, hey, I would love to share my camera, people, please feel free to jump on video, but no pressure to do so. And then also, as we go through, I would love to hear participation. So you can use the chat, you can come off of mute. So I have a few questions, as we go through. Hopefully this won't be 40 minutes of a talking head. But we'll see. We'll see how engaged our attendees are today. I'm also really happy to see that I have a few of my colleagues at Leukemia and Lymphoma Society joining us today. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Hold on. My phone just started playing music. Well, it's like my stage music. It's my walk on.
Hey,
anyway,
no, that's perfect.
I know, right? Roll with those punches. Okay. So I'm excited to talk about this for a few reasons. First, because this is not new. This is actually a pretty well vetted approach to talent strategy over the last 10 or 15 years or so. But what's new for me is starting to look at application of how can this get even broader, knowing some of the changes that we've seen within the HR profession, and also looking at like things like pace of change and some of those other pressures that are being put on our businesses. So when I joined I'll refer to it as LLS, just shorthand, because I get a little tongue-tied. When I joined LLS in January, my leader, Orlando, had challenged me with, like, we really need somebody to come in and lead talent in this holistic way. What's your methodology? Like, how do you like to look at this? What's your approach? And I mentioned to him that I tend to drive more with a skills first approach. And I am telling you, even in my interview process, I don't think even I realized what I was saying at the time, because now that I have just jumped into the deep end and I have been learning everything I can about this topic over the last 6 months, I have realized there is so much that I don't know. So cool for all of you. You get to learn from the learner, because I'm going to share what I've figured out, but also as we go along, would love for you to share any insights and knowledge you have on the topic as we learn together. All right, so my first little chat question, if you guys are comfortable, what is skills first? Like, what does that even mean? Or when you hear this word, what do you think of? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to type in your comments in the chat. And while I do that, I'll give you my interpretation of this. I first heard the term skills first when I was recruiting at an agency about 8 to 10 years ago. I met with a client of mine who was getting ready to hire a new HR person for their team. And when they were telling me, we were doing our needs assessment, what are you looking for? What's the right profile of the person? They mentioned to me, I really need somebody that has a skills first mindset. And so thinking of this of like, well, how is that different? Like, of course, like, yeah, the skills are reflected in the job description. That's pretty obvious. And this leader said, no, specifically, I need somebody that is a mindset of looking at talent through the skills that they have rather than the responsibilities that are typically housed on the job description. And so when I heard that, like, that was the first time where it got my little wheels and my gerbil wheel going of, wow, this shouldn't be innovative, but that feels pretty innovative. And so since then, I've kind of heard it here and there. And I also want to give a quick shout out, because I'm going to be referencing it in my presentation. Skills First has become so popular, in fact, that SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, has partnered with the SHRM Foundation and I think 80 might be on this call. She's like the one to go to with these questions. To provide like completely free resources, a whole website that has toolkits, it has maturity assessments, like everything is completely free as they are working to enable a skills first future. So doesn't look like anybody was brave enough to put their own thoughts in the chat. That's okay.
Well, no, we've got a couple here. Did I miss it? I totally missed it. Let's see. Jonathan, knowledge, behaviors, and abilities first. Donnie, applicable, relevant, soft skill that relate to the position, functional knowledge can always be taught. And Addie, viewing your current and future talent by their demonstrated abilities. Oh, well, 80 gets she has a little bit of a cheat code because she's been working on this for the past year. So those are great. Wonderful contributions and exactly what we're looking for. The other thing is we're still figuring it out and new things are popping up all the time, but I really like those definitions and pieces that you shared. So thank you for that. So when we say what is skills first, I like to look at, I'm a big Venn diagram person. I love these things. I like to geek out on them. So I like to look at this as skills are what I have. Experience is what I've done. And then there's this really beautiful sweet spot in the middle of capabilities, which is what I can do with it. So talent strategy, a skills first talent strategy prioritizes the skills that people possess, however they are gained,
over proxies like degrees, titles, or tenure. So instead of focusing on you need to have a 4-year bachelor's degree or must have a master's in, skills first is really looking at what are those capabilities and skills that the individual is bringing to be able to impact the business and the organization, rather than looking more historically at the experience or the education side. Also, just a quick mention there, skills first practices widen the talent pools and center demonstrated capability, which I think is an important component of why the shift has happened. We'll talk a bit more about, why it matters now specifically, but if you think about how trends have changed in business over the last 15, 20, even 25 years, dating myself a bit, but even going back to like when, there was the tech bubble and there was the rise of the .com industry, like that doesn't seem like that long ago, but that was 25 years ago. And so when you think about how technology has really impacted the way that we hire, that we deploy talent, that we operationalize within our business, a lot of things look different than they did in the previous century. I won't name it, but the 1900s. All right, so why does it matter now? I'm a big believer in stats. You're building your business case. You got to understand like what's the ROI of anything that we're going to do if we're trying to ask to get support. So a few things, 2 in 3, so 2/3 or roughly 67% of working age US adults lack a 4-year degree. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. There's additional data that you can always go into. We won't assess the correlation and causation in this meeting, but there are less and less US workers that are coming out with 4-year degrees. The big one for me is pace of change. So wild to think about, but 30% of today's core skills, not like broad skills, but core skills will be obsolete in 2 years. That is a crazy statistic to me and a huge business case for why skills first is so imperative. Skills first reduces cost per hire by 30% and turnover by 40%. If you're able to quantify within your business exactly what that number is, there's a few metrics that go into that, but on average, cost per hire is sitting anywhere between about $5,000 to $7,000 right now. And turnover, depending upon your industry, can cost anywhere from, on the low end, $15,000, on the high end for specific like executive roles or key roles, can even go well into the millions. So when you're talking about like the dollars and cents of skills first, there is definite quantifiable ROI on this. And then lastly, this is particularly important to us at LLS, but we are very, very involved and interested and dedicated to creating inclusive cultures. So I put the title on here. I know it's a little dicey, but I'm just going to call it DEI. So we're using the same language. But Skills First expands the reach to STARS workers, which boosts DEI and employer brand credibility. And if you're not familiar with STARS, I have a little asterisk over there on the left, which stands for Skilled Through Alternative Routes. So these would be individuals, for example, that didn't go to that 4-year college university, but maybe had a mentor that developed them for the first 3 or 4 years of their career. So knowing that has a strong correlation is, again, very important to us at LLS and hopefully for you and your businesses as well. All right, pause there. Matt, any comments or questions in the chat so far?
No more comments, but I had a question. If you by chance know any of those core skills that are going to be obsolete, like what types of things are, obviously we have AI that's really helping with a lot of tasks, but if you had any insight there.
I certainly don't want to misrepresent. I know that there's a lot of SHRM as well as Gallup both have research reports on what those are. If any of you in the audience have those, if you want to put them in the chat, feel free. But to your point, AI is definitely putting a lot of pressure on some of those. Anything that can be automated, there are definitely cases for customer service skills, which is interesting because you could argue that customer service skills are human skills. But when you really break down process and operationalizing, seamless experiences, they have actually found that customer service skills are better deployed by AI and bots than they are by humans. So when it comes to escalation services, so when you need a human to intervene because it takes more critical thinking, then those skills are still relevant. But just like your basic level, that was an interesting one to me that I didn't expect. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Awesome.
All right, I love going to presentations that have geeky little tables. The text on this is really small, and I don't expect everybody to read through this, but if you want a copy of these slides or if you want to reference this, I'm happy to share it. I really like understanding visually what is the past of what we're talking about and what is current state future, so I can wrap my head around like what connects to what. So thinking about some of the areas in HR that are affected by skills first, these are some of the lenses that we can talk about to give examples. So as a design anchor, meaning like this is our philosophy, this is how we think about it, it's our bread and butter, it flows through our veins. Job versus skill approach as a design anchor, traditionally we have fixed jobs, titles, defined work, org charts, follows hierarchy. It's very structural, which a lot of that comes from like Ford and the manufacturing industry of like the early 1920s. So a skills-based or a skills first, the difference here is this is where we have discrete skills or capabilities that define the work. So we have talent marketplaces. We're looking for projects and gigs that can flex around the need, which is very different than here is your job. You are in this box. This is what you do. So no longer are we hearing that's not in my job description, things that tend to be so prevalent within HR, but we're really focusing on, again, as just the way that we think about this, we are trying to create more agility and leverage the full extent of capacity of an individual rather than the box of the job that we may have originally hired them for. So why does this one in particular matter? It's because the half-life of a skill is less than 3 years, particularly in tech and operational roles, which means that rigid jobs cannot keep pace. So if you think about, when it comes to strategic workforce planning, for example, it can be so disheartening to go through your 2 or 3 year cycles and realize like, oh my gosh, we have an entire department that is now totally not relevant. We're going to have to do a restructuring. Those people are going to lose their jobs. Well, what if we could get to a point where no, we have our core team. We've been able to upskill and reskill and develop them in a way that, yeah, those jobs are gone. We don't need that work anymore, but now we can redeploy that talent in other parts of the business for better continuity, for better employee engagement, for longer tenure. And oh yeah, by the way, it's also something that employees are looking for in continuous development. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, there are some additional ones: talent pool, workforce planning, career growth. So you can see some of the more traditional, the way it's been done, but then also what it might look like. And again, it's not the only way, but some examples of what that might look like in a skills-based or a skills first type of future. Okay. As I've mentioned a couple of times, this is not a one size fits all. It is not an out of the box. This is the way that you do it. It's really more of like mindset. It's the approach of, if you're trying to work toward this, there's a few different ways that you could deploy this, even on a small scale, if you're not ready for the whole enchilada of looking at this as a complete architecture. So 3 examples. You can look at skills first hiring. So an example might look like filtering in talent via demonstrated capabilities. This is, in my opinion, where I see most organizations already doing this. They're doing behavioral-based questions that are trying to understand, like, what are the skills that you are coming into the organization with compared to the work that needs to be done, or what the requirements of this job are. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's fully skills first, but usually, in my experience, this is where most companies have already started to adopt some of the skills first over the traditional job first mindset. So you also have skills first mobility. So just in case you're not familiar with the term, mobility is you're already working inside the organization. Where can you go from here? Can you get promoted? Are there stretch projects? Can you potentially move into other departments? And so that might look like mapping internal gigs and career paths by skill adjacency. Skill here can also work here. As an example, in HR, a lot of skills in HR, believe it or not, are transferable to marketing. Shout out to Mobrium on that. But when you start to understand, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I've worked in HR for 15 years. I had no idea that I could potentially go and run a marketing campaign or host an event for, peers and professionals to come together. Sometimes when you start to reevaluate those skills, it opens up a lot of possibilities and potential, and also keeps your people in a more relevant state for future employment. And then last example here is skills first culture. So again, this is more like we drink the Kool-Aid, it runs through our veins. This is how we make decisions and how we hold each other accountable. So everyday decisions of projects, rewards, learning, those are guided by skills signals. And I would be curious if people are willing in the chat to share, based in the organization that you're working with today, do you feel like you are already within one of these three examples? Like, are you doing skills first hiring? Have you, done any of the skills first mobility, or do you feel like you have a skills first culture? Give that a second.
Yeah,
Matt, for you, Matt, you're doing your own thing, right? Like, you're starting your organization. I'd be curious from a founder perspective, would you see this as an opportunity of like even scaling your business as it grows? Is this something you would want to do at the very beginning? Do you see potential risks in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's increased opportunity and risk of not hiring by skills for a startup, because if you get the wrong person, there's a lot more weight financially on the payroll and dependency on that person to do their job. I would say as a company gets larger, the risk and reward of one person not being a fit goes down because it's a smaller percentage of the overall workforce. But there's still a huge upswing for a larger organization to deploy this mindset across a whole workforce. But we have a couple part-time people. We had one full-time person that ended up leaving, and I think it was kind of a mismatch a little bit. And the skills, we didn't do a skills assessment of any kind. We hired that person purely on a recommendation. And he honestly did great, but I just think it wasn't quite the right alignment with what we needed and where his passion was. And so that's just kind of how it goes. But we're grateful for every single person, and no one's either good or bad. If there's not an alignment, it's just about finding the right fit and realizing that every person has the ability to excel in something or many things that they care about.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know we got some responses in the chat, which we'll get to. As I was listening to that, I don't know if anybody on the call here has ever worked for a business where it's like you have somebody that is such a great culture fit. I mean, they live the values, they make people feel, great by working there. They are accountable. They have all of those things that you want in an employee, but man, they are in the wrong role. They're in the wrong job, right? And I've worked in organizations where you see that person and it's where else can we put them? Because the stuff that we can't lose is there, but we know that they have other skills that can be deployed. So in my experience, it's usually, what jobs do we have open? Let's go to the job board and see, like, maybe we could upskill them or get them connected to this position. But this is really looking at it to provide more flexibility and agility to do that. So in the case of you had somebody that had the talent, that was doing good work, but it just was the mismatch. Maybe in that case, it actually empowers you more as the organization to make those quick decisions to say, great talent, not the right fit, versus great fit. Let's find where we can utilize their skills in a way that helps drive the business. So I did want to get to the comments. Matt, do you want to read through those?
So Kara said, I think we were thrown into a skills first environment due to being headquartered in a rural community without a lot of candidates who fit the quote needs, education titles of our position. Not that we are good at it. Also, my mic is not working, or I would just jump in and talk. No worries, Kara, and that's a great comment. And then Glenn mentioned, traditionally, it has been a more casual atmosphere, and skills rest in the eye of the beholder, the hiring manager.
Yeah, and Glenn had a comment up above that too, that they have done this with hiring, but in the process of defining skills across the org to fuel internal growth and mobility. So great. I love to hear that some people are already working on this. You're probably in similar states that I have been over the last few months as I've been learning and upskilling here myself. Okay, so here's what we're doing at LLS. Again, small text, but I'll walk you through it. So we have a lot of whys, and there were some of these whys existed before I joined the organization. Some of these whys we've been able to uncover and discover together as I've been working with my team and working with the broader business and upskilling here. But if I really, really just boil this down to the crystal essence of why we're doing this. At LLS, our mission is fueled by donations. We are a fundraising organization that does great, amazing, wonderful work for blood cancer patients and their caregivers. Every single dollar that we raise translates to patient support and life-saving research. So if we can't adapt faster than the fundraising landscape shifts, we risk the very engine that keeps our mission running. And so that's why we're anchoring on this model, because we recognize that it's the most agile, flexible methodology that's out there that gives us that strategic advantage to do the mission work that we need. The other thing that I think is worth noting with this, though, is we're not doing this perfectly. We're not waiting for the waterfall of everything is in place. We have all of the answers. We are moving forward with a critical thinking and design thinking mindset that we understand we're probably going to make some mistakes. We're really big into design thinking methodology of pilot, test small, iterate, take feedback, make changes, make it better on the next one. But we are moving forward full steam ahead because our intention is we have a problem to solve and we're going to start small and we'll just make it a little bit better every time. So if in design thinking, if you've never heard the analogy of if my problem that I'm trying to solve is to get to work faster, I might start with a very rudimentary skateboard with, bumpy little wheels, but it's going to get me there faster than my feet. But as I iterate and I start to make better and better changes to that and improvements, that skateboard might eventually get a handle and it might eventually, get a motor, and then it might turn into a motorcycle, and then we might be able to eventually build a car. But the thing is, it's about the problem that we're solving along the way. And it's not about the product at the end of what we're building. So for us, it's kind of a mind shift change, right? Because I think in an HR especially, we are a lot more comfortable in the, I want to check all the boxes, know all of the risks, the black and whites. That's where I know the business expects me to think. And we've kind of intertwined our value along with that of like, I don't want to make a mistake. I can't mess this up. People's lives could be impacted here. But when we say stagnant, we also risk even bigger ramifications of that. So for us, our why, no money, no mission, as I said. I learned that at SHRM from Johnny C. Taylor, and I have taken it with me with loving affection all the way over to LLS. We are also looking at that agility that I mentioned, where we have more ability to flex talent throughout the organization without having to add additional headcount. Our fundraising agility, looking at our DEI efforts as well as our employer branding efforts, particularly in creating inclusive employer of choice practices. And then lastly, on our employee engagement, clear skill pathways. So wanting with the intent there of like higher retention in a pipeline of future leaders, we have a great advantage at LLS where we don't have crazy turnover, but we do in certain roles. And so when you look at our averages are great, but it doesn't mean that there's not pockets of the organization that we see this impact and that we can do better. So our plan, here's the overall vision. And for my colleagues at LLS, some of this might be new to you because I don't even think I've shared this fully with my team. This is hot off the press. But when I think of the long-term vision, we are in infrastructure stages. We are still assessing the skills necessary against our strategy to see, current state, what is the benchmark of where we are and that gap analysis. But I will tell you the vision of where we want to go here is a skills ecosystem where job ads list the 5 must-haves as an example of capabilities, not the big long list of the duties. We're looking for candidates to complete a short skill assessment that those results feed directly into our skill library. So at the time of hire, we have an understanding of not just the maturity of the skill, but the skills that they have, so we can very quickly be able to leverage those. We're looking to build a dynamic talent marketplace. So employees would bid on stretch projects. Managers see real-time skill ratings, bandwidth, their PTO, performance flags, before they look at potentially bringing that person on for the particular project work that's needed. There's a big part of this. Like I get asked this all the time. How do you do pay differentials? Like how are you paying for a job that might require significant different skills than this other job? And how do you manage the pay difference between those for the same person? Well, we have to figure that out. But I can tell you there are businesses that are doing this and are doing this very effectively. So just in the times, you think about my customer service days remind me of having a pay differential for speaking Spanish, or having a pay differential for working a less optimal schedule, the weekends or holidays. So there are definitely applications of what we have done in the past and how that can be applied to this, but it does take some figuring it out. And I think the discipline to be able to sit with it long enough to figure it out, and the patience and tolerance to know that you might not get it exactly right, but you can still try and get better and iterate on those changes. Skill validation is another big part of it. If we're just relying heavily on somebody saying, I have these skills, this will not work. So we have to look at a variation of where we are going to be bringing in those inputs, everything from self-evals to peer evals to manager evals. But then also sometimes we have to evaluate using micro assessments, have somebody actually go through and show that they know how to do these things, which can get a little complicated when they're not as tactical or when they're not computer first. So if they're not in that kind of environment, it does get a little bit trickier. Thinking of, in particular, fundraising or out in the field where we have people that are essentially selling to individuals. How do we understand what level of skills they have in that capacity? So ideally, if we could think of, just as a hypothetical scenario, Matt, I'm interviewing you and I see that you have an incredible list of skills, and we've talked about 12 in particular, and 6 are hot skills that we really need at the organization. You have proficiency in AI. You're really good with leadership components that we need. So within that conversation, we hire you for a core job, right? So your day-to-day activities, this is going to be the functional area that you keep the wheels on for our business. And that's going to allocate 60% of your weekly time. But 40% of your time, you can go to our marketplace, our ecosystem, and see these are the project work needs that we have as a business. And as long as you have the approved skills, you can start bidding for those projects within the business to take up that other extra 40% of your time. Now, if you decide to just do the core functions of your job at that 60%, you'll get paid for that 60% and we'll be good. But that other part of your compensation, you have a lot more ownership and flexibility and control of being able to make more, or manage your work-life balance better if you want to take almost like a part-time semi-sabbatical for keeping your bills paid while also making sure that you're keeping your skills fresh. So those would be examples of what this might look like in a future focused. But again, that's the long-term vision. We got to do a lot of work for infrastructure to get there. But we feel really confident that we are doing the work today to support that.
Wow. I just had one comment on that, Elisa. I think, some individuals may have different career definitions of success, and they may be more driven to do a lot more of those gig projects than someone else. And I think this allows for some flexibility for individuals to align with their definition of success based on how much they want to work, what they want to learn, where they want to develop new skills. And that can change over the lifetime of a career as well. So it sounds really neat to set it up that way.
Thank you. I think it's also understanding that this is to benefit the business as well. So if we can get the work done with less financial investment, but still have that flexibility to be able to, if you have seasonality to your business, for example, knowing that you can ramp up and ramp down relatively quickly without having to go to the expense of hiring external, like temps or contractors during that period. But also when that period ends, you don't have to lay off and do a mass exodus of your existing staff. That's a really big deal. And I do want to take just a little moment to talk about how this impacts your employer brand, because from the connection of, your ability to attract and hire and retain future talent, if you're going through those back and forths of ramp, lay off, ramp, externally, it sends a signal to people. Maybe it's not true, but it sends a signal that I don't really want to hitch my horse to that wagon because I don't think they know what they're doing. And they may have a real reason internally that they can't share externally of why they're doing it that way. But when the brand reputation starts to suffer, then it's going to have this ripple impact on every other part of your business. So even just from that small sliver of an example of how this red thread ties together and how everything impacts each other, I think that's an important one to note, because it often gets overlooked until all of a sudden it's a crisis and you've called your PR team to address, like, what are we going to do about all these crazy Glassdoor reviews? That's right, Jonathan, the red thread. The red thread and the bedazzled baton. These are phrases that are very common in our talent team. All right, so 3 steps to get started. I think it's, understandable that everybody is going to be at different phases of this. And obviously this webinar was more of an introduction to Skills First rather than a deep dive into here's your frameworks, here's your templates. But I do have a slide for you on that. I do think it's important that when you start entering this work, to start with a manageable bite. I have worked for teams where it's like, oh my gosh, the moon and stars is huge and this is going to be so wonderful and we are literally going to change the world. And then all of a sudden, 6 months in, people are burned out and it loses focus. And all of a sudden something else important comes up and it gets put on the back burner and then it never happens because it's too big. So just as the adage goes, let's not try to eat the elephant. Let's take some bites. I've never eaten elephant. I don't know how it tastes, but maybe we should come up with a different analogy. I don't know. I don't really want to go out and eat elephants. So first and foremost, this is a really, really important step. And even if this is where you're at, it's a big one. You need to define your why. Why do you want to do this? Is it, for example, do you need to do this for cost savings? Is this a sustainability initiative? Is it to increase your DEI efforts, or what I like to call sneaking the veggies on the pizza for dinner? Are you trying to look for ways to introduce this as an outcome with DEI rather than calling it DEI and drawing attention and alarm bells to it? This can be a way that you can support DEI without necessarily having to call it that. Or are you looking for agility like us? Like that's a big one to us. We want to make sure that we are staying modern and agile and top of mind, and that we are keeping pace with the pace of change as much as anyone can. The second step, again, start small, pilot just one unit or a job family, or measure a metric within a particular team and maybe do some A/B testing of how it works for this team versus how it works for this team. Starting small and doing pilots not only helps you control things a little bit better. We love control in HR. I am not excluded from that stereotype, but it also translates into a really powerful number 3. So if you're able to pilot and gather that feedback and create stories around this is what we did and here's what happened, now you get to scale it. So scaling with story helps people connect to something that's not just PowerPoint slides of concept or proposals or cost asks. Like really stories are, this is what we thought would happen. Here's what happened. This is the success we're seeing. And now here's where we want to take it next because we want that impact to get even bigger. So leading with data is a critical component of being credible in our profession. So the more data that you can get in your pilots, the more that's going to help inform your storytelling to be able to take it into bigger and broader impact. Okay, I do have resources. So these are my top 2. These have become, like, of all of the vetting that I've done, these have been the most helpful for me as I've been doing this work. And I'll talk about the benefits and options of both. So I did mention this earlier at the beginning that the SHRM Foundation has a completely free, and to my knowledge, I don't even think you have to be a SHRM member. This is just accessible to the world because it's through the foundation. So if you scan that QR code or go to that link, that will take you to the website. And I'm telling you, it has everything. It has case studies on organizations that are doing this in different ways. It has, there's a really cool maturity assessment that you can take to understand like where you are today in this. And we'll also spit out a nice little report of like next steps and guidance on where you should go from there. It takes, 8 to 10 minutes to complete. They have webinars, they have blog posts, they have like everything is cross-referenced and beautiful. It's amazing. 80 that just had to drop off. I know she mentioned in the chat she had another meeting. This is like her baby. She's been working on this site and this project for over a year and has done an incredible job, obviously, with her team and others within SHRM Foundation to get this accessible and live. It just launched, I believe, at the beginning of June. So it is very, very new and very, very relevant. The other one that I have found to be significantly helpful is Red Thread Research. So Red Thread Research is a membership organization. This is a paid option. They do not have, it's gated. So a lot of what I've been able to get is through my membership. But if you have the means, or if your organization is willing to pay for that, the things I found, like they have this entire hub and their research is incredible. So if you're trying to build that business case, if you're looking for those trends, if you need to connect it to your industry, amazing, amazing content there. But they have also been unbeatable, in my opinion, as far as like the templates, the frameworks, the stuff to use to do this work. So instead of just thinking of it hypothetically and like having to scratch your head of like, how are we even going to do this? Step by step, they have those resources to really guide you through. And for added, they consult as well if you're interested in that of like, I think we need a partner to outsource a bit. They are incredibly talented. And also, just as an aside, they are a full female team, which I just think is really cool because particularly in research, that's not something very common. Some of the smartest women I have ever met in my life. So that's my quick plug for Red Thread. QR code will take you to their site as well. But with that, that is it. That takes me to time. So we have maybe a couple minutes for Q&A. And then I also have my LinkedIn profile. If you want to connect with me, I'm happy to chat with you more. Or if you want to keep in touch about how this goes for us at LLS or share maybe some of your own experiences, I'm very up to that. So Matt, I'll let you moderate us on Q&A, and if there's anything else that anybody from the group would like to share.
Yeah, thank you, Elisa. And that was super helpful, incredible insights and some great resources to keep the learning going with those two recommendations. Really awesome. It looks like Jonathan had one more comment. What might work for one part of the business or organization function might not be the same as another, especially if those business areas have different skills needs. Technology, AI versus revenue, for example. And he said, great call out, Elisa. So that was a really good point. If you guys have any other comments, feel free to unmute or put that in chat. And then I'm going to just share a little preview of our next month's session really quick. And then we will be all done here. So let me just pull that up. Share screen. All right. So again, thank you, Elisa, for the incredible insights. Can you guys see my screen? Did that share? Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Next month, we're going to be welcoming Donnie Phillips from Vault Verify, and he's going to be talking all about HR's role in data protection. So this one's going to be hugely valuable to you as well. If you'd like to join us, let me just share that link to register for this event in the chat real quick, and then we will include it in the email as well. But here's this in the chat. And just a final thing, thank you for joining us, for being a part of the Mobrium webinar series. Tell your HR friends to come join us once a month. These are free. We at Mobrium, we sponsor all of the costs for accreditation for the activity codes. If you need any help with your online reputation and reviews, we're talking Glassdoor reviews, Indeed reviews, internal employee feedback like an anonymous suggestion box, or even engagement surveys. We now do all forms of employee feedback, external and internal, centralized in one platform. So if you want to learn more, message me, email us, go to our website, and we'd love to connect. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next month.
Bye everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thanks guys.